What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my solo role-playing and wargaming channel. I'm the Lonely Dungeoneer, and this is the fourth session of Let's Play Original Dungeons & Dragons with Chainmail Solo. In the last session, after days of rainy gloom, golden rays shone down on the city of Arto, where, in front of the Mindful Mouse, our armor-clad party assembled for the journey into the Baylor Mountains and to the Dwarven Glory, whose ruinous halls contain an abandoned Dwarven city. But rather than marching beyond the city gates, our party was rather diverted into the Mindful Mouse for an uneasy discussion. One of our party members shared the recent news, or rumor if you will, that the wandering prophet and doomsayer Seabroth, well known for his discourse, charging the kingdom that it should be doing more against the vampire menace, was slain on the open road outside of Arto by none other than a vampire. And our party is once again huddled around a table at the Mindful Mouse, this time discussing how they can stay safe on the road if they were to encounter a vampire. Would it simply kill them all? Is there anything that they can do to defend themselves, or perhaps to ward a vampire away? Now, the fantasy supplement for Chainmail doesn't cover vampires, but Book 2 of OD&D, Monsters and Treasure, does. And from what I can tell here, vampires in OD&D are incredibly dangerous, and will be quite lethal to our party unless they have and can make use of key information. And we shouldn't assume that the party has access to any concrete vampire vulnerability, but rather access to the local legends and rumors that would have naturally grown up around a city that has been historically beleaguered by vampires. And it's a foregone conclusion that the party is aware of rumors about vampires, perhaps how they live or what they would do to a dwarf if they caught one. But we need to discover now what exactly are the rumors that they have heard, so that we can have a better understanding of how this party would go about attempting to protect themselves against vampires. So I'll ask the Oracle now about common aspects of vampiric myth that I think the dwarves of Arto have a pretty decent chance of already knowing. I'm going to ask the Oracle now if the dwarves have picked up on the fact that vampires usually only attack at night. And given their long history with vampires on the Isle of Baylor, I'm going to say that this particular rumor, it's very likely that the dwarves are already aware of this. And with a chaos factor of 3, that makes this question a roll under 50. And we get a 56, no. And if the dwarves aren't generally aware of this fact, then that, to me, makes it seem much more unlikely that they know any other real concrete information about vampires. But I don't know that for sure, so I'm going to keep asking the Oracle questions. And we already know that the dwarves are not aware of a vampire's weakness to sunlight, but are they perhaps aware instead of the vampire's weakness to garlic? I'm going to say, given our prior result, that this is unlikely, and at a chaos factor of 3, that makes this a roll under 15, and we get a 95, exceptional no. And this tells me not only that the dwarves are unaware of a vampire's weakness to garlic, but also that, in general, the dwarves have never performed any kind of reconnaissance or research into vampires, and as a result, don't really have access to any kind of reliable information about them. So we have an extraordinarily misinformed party, but we do have a secret weapon, and that is Darcy, whose extreme intelligence makes it likely that she's able to recognize patterns in the vampire's behavior. And so the next thing I want to know from the Oracle is whether Darcy has been trying to keep up with news of vampire raids and sightings in the region recently. We don't know a lot about Darcy. We had the scene with her and her partner in the tax collector's office that doesn't really say anything about whether she would be interested in vampires, so I'm going to call this a 50-50, which would make this a roll under 25. And we get a 47. No, I'm sorry, that is a 74. Either way, that's still a no. So Darcy doesn't have a particular interest in keeping up with vampire sightings and raids. But she has undoubtedly heard of vampire attacks in the past. She's aware of the kidnapping of the Princess of Baylor, and now she's aware of the death of Seabrough at the hands of a vampire. Does Darcy put together that the vampires are choosing to attack individuals that are either weaker, such as a child, or alone, such as Seabrough, so that she can make intelligent recommendations to the group? I don't know the answer, but this time, since we're questioning Darcy's intelligence, we're going to make our first ability check. Now, while Chainmail does have a man-to-man combat system, it has no concept of playing as an individual with unique ability scores. And original Dungeons & Dragons really doesn't give a lot of guidance on how to use ability scores that are not your prime requisite, and it certainly doesn't contain rules for any kind of a skill check. And we could use the fate chart to resolve these kinds of questions. We could use each character's ability score to inform how likely or unlikely it is for that character to accomplish a given task. But I'm rather going to turn to the earliest Dungeons & Dragons publication that I could find that gives clear guidance on how to make use of ability scores. And that is in the first ever issue of Dragon Magazine, in an interesting article entitled How to Use Non-Prime Requisite Character Attributes. And I'll demonstrate how it works now by using it to test Darcy in whether she identifies the pattern that vampires are attacking individuals that are either weaker or alone. Okay, so we're first going to roll for the kind of die to be used in the next step, which is interesting already, and we want to roll the highest die possible. To make this roll, we're going to roll a D100, then we're going to add the ability score that we're testing. So for Darcy, this is her intelligence, which is 18. And then because Darcy has not been intentionally keeping track of the news of vampire raids and sightings in the area, I'm going to give all of her die rolls a -2 modifier. So let's roll now. We get, is that a 9 or a 5? We're going to say, the ruling is this is a 53. If we add 18 to that, we get 6371 -2 for the -2 modifier because Darcy's not keeping up with things, and we get 69. And if we refer to the table, you can see that a roll of 69 will result in a 10-sided die being used in the next step. Now we're going to take the die that we earned in the last step, we're going to roll it, and we're going to multiply that by the ability score that's being tested. And this is once again Darcy's intelligence of 18, which is just about 20. So if we rolled a 5 out of 10, that would be almost a 100% chance of success. However, we are going to subtract 2 from this die roll to represent Darcy's negative modifier that we've been discussing. So really, if we can roll a 7 or higher, it's going to be just about 100% chance of success. So let's roll this now. We get 0. That is a 10. Now, factoring in our -2 modifier, that gives us an 8. And 8 times 18 is 144, which means we have a 144% chance of success. So the next step would be rolling a D100 and seeing if it comes under the target number. And with a target of 144, we don't even have to roll it. We now know our answer is yes. So Darcy does realize that the vampires are tending to attack people that they can find either on their own, that are alone, or that are vulnerable in some way. And so she might recommend that the group just travel as one large pack without allowing individuals to wander off on their own. And because Darcy is already counting on and depending on any profits that are made off of this expedition, it seems to me that she would be motivated to try to influence the group into action, into getting moving, but in a safe way. So my next question for the Oracle is regarding Darcy's behavior. Given the information that she just pieced together, does she try to influence the group into movement by assuring them that if they move together as a group without letting individuals wander off alone, that they will likely be safe at least from vampires on the road? I'm going to say that the odds of her attempting this is nearly certain, which is a roll under 65, and we get a 35. That is a yes. So as the party is gathered around what we can only presume is one giant table at the Mindful Mouse, Darcy decides to speak up and share with the party her idea that the vampires are not attacking well-armed groups of adventurers, but rather those who are vulnerable and those who are alone, and we are neither. So she says that if they can only band together and remain vigilant, then it won't be a vampire that kills them on their way to the mountains. And that'll get a chuckle out of the dwarves, but is it enough to convince them into action now? I'm not sure. I think it's very likely, but why don't we test Darcy's charisma next to determine whether her delivery had any impact on how the party's feeling. Going back to the table from Dragon Magazine for our ability check rules, we're going to roll a d100 and add Darcy's charisma of 7. We get a 93, that is going to be a 100. So the die used in the next step is going to be 12-sided. Next, we're going to roll the 12-sided die and multiply the outcome by Darcy's charisma of 7. We get a 4 times 7, that is 28. And so there is a 28% chance that Darcy's delivery had some kind of positive outcome on the way the party is feeling about the information that she shared. So we're going to roll under 28, and we get, oh my gosh, is that a 9 or a 1? If that's a 9, that is definitely a no. But if it's a 1, it's a yes. And that is pretty split. So I guess I will roll a second time. Wow, that was basically too close to call. 53, that is a no. So Darcy's delivery wasn't particularly inspiring, but the dwarves were already hoping to get underway. Is this new information and are the suggestions made by Darcy enough to move our party into action? I'll ask the Oracle and give this odds of very likely. We get a roll under 50. And we get a 72, which is a no. So the party is still worried about being attacked by a vampire on the road, even in light of Darcy's information and suggestions. And this is all really surprising to me because they seemed so confident just a few days ago. To get a better sense of where the conversation is headed next, I'm going to roll for a pair of words on the character conversations table. And we get 1, that is abuse, 50, abuse hopeless. How very interesting. So to me, this means that some of our party members, maybe several, are having serious reservations and that this debate is now becoming heated. They're actually arguing seriously now about whether they should even be going in the first place. Which makes me want to know now, is the party going to fracture? Is it going to split into two, perhaps, with one group of individuals deciding they're going to press on anyway, and another group deciding to bow out? At a minimum, it appears that Darcy is really motivated to actually go on this expedition. So I want to ask the Oracle now, are there party members that are bound and determined to go on the expedition, even if others leave the adventuring party? And I'm going to say that this is nearly certain. That is a roll under 65 with the current chaos factor. And we get a 0.6. That is an exceptional yes. So we have at least one subgroup within our larger party of 12 that is absolutely determined to go on this expedition. They've already made a commitment, they've already made arrangements and prepared for the journey, so whatever happens here, they are heading into the mountains. But they're in the middle of, and a part of, this larger heated argument. Party members are maybe standing up now and shouting, pointing across at each other, making a big racket and commotion in the Mindful Mouse on a random morning. Does their sudden outburst of anger cause the bartenders to take notice and run over to try to understand what's going on and to calm them down? I'm going to say that this is very likely. That is a roll under 50. We get an 82, no. It's funny because the low chaos factor is causing a lot of our fate questions to result in a no, except the one exceptional yes that we got when asking whether there were any party members that are exceptionally determined to go on the expedition, whatever the outcome of the conversation is. And so I think I'm going to interpret this no as the bartenders actually like slinking back either behind the bar or even into the back so that they can just avoid this confrontation. They don't want to get in the way of our party at all. So I want to ask the Oracle an important question now, and that is the party going to split up and fracture as a result of this very heated argument in the Mindful Mouse? And this question feels like it is both important to the narrative and a good divider between scenes. The outcome will probably result in a new scene. So rather than asking the fate chart, I'm rather going to make this a scene question. So we're going to roll a d10 against the chaos factor of 3, and we get a 3. So we rolled the chaos factor exactly, which means that we're not going to get exactly the scene that we envisioned with the party fracturing and splintering under the weight of the argument, but rather we're going to enter into an altered scene, which will still result in the party ultimately fracturing, but with some tweak or twist that we did not anticipate. And I have a couple of ideas in mind for scene adjustments. My expectations were that maybe about half or a little less than half of the party would actually set out on our journey, and the rest would stay behind. I was thinking that maybe an adjustment could be that most of the party decides to go, or rather that actually not very many, a very small number of the party decides to actually stick with the journey and move on. So I can't really choose between the two. I think I'm rather going to roll again on the scene adjustment table to see how we're going to modify the next scene. So I'm going to roll a d10 against the scene adjustment table. We get a 1. So we're going to remove a character. And I'll interpret this to mean that one of our player characters actually stays behind, either Lila, Darcy, or Yalkand. And I really don't believe that this could be Darcy, but we'll test it anyway. Because we rolled for an altered scene, I'm going to once again reduce the chaos factor to 2. And then I'll ask the Oracle, does Darcy decide to stay behind? I'm going to say that this is nearly impossible. No, I'll make it very unlikely. With a chaos factor of 2, this is going to be a roll under 5. And we get a 55, no. Doubles, but not under our chaos factor of 2, so no random event. Okay, let's rather ask, does Lila decide to stay behind? I'll make this 50-50. This is going to be a roll under 15. And we get a 69. That is also a no. And finally, I'll ask, does Yalkand stay behind? I'm going to make this, since this is the last character out of the 3, we'll call this one nearly certain, which is going to be a roll under 50. If we get a no, we'll interpret this as fewer than expected party members choosing to go along with the expedition. So this is a roll under 50. Yalkand is not going to stay behind. Yalkand is going to press forward. And that's actually really exciting. So now we need to understand exactly how many individuals are going to be coming with us on the journey, on the expedition. We already know that Lila, Darcy, and Yalkand are going. And this is an altered scene. And the alteration is removing a character. So I guess I'm going to ask the difficult question. Does anyone else other than Lila, Darcy, and Yalkand choose to embark on this journey? I'm going to say that the odds are 50-50. This is a roll under 15. We get a 74. That is a no. And so we will conveniently, because we've already fleshed these 3 characters out, and inconveniently, because we're downgrading from a throng or a small army to a squad of 3 fighting men, push forward with the team of Lila, Darcy, and Yalkand. See, Mythic just kept saying no because the Oracle didn't want us to set out with 12 party members. For whatever reason, it wanted us rather to scope in on a smaller group. Sometimes, or oftentimes I should say, the Oracle actually takes on a personality of its own. So the party is still wagging their fingers in each other's faces and calling each other names. There's insults going around. Just all in all, being a massive nuisance at the Mindful Mouse. And I want to know now if Darcy, Lila, and Yalkand just decide together that they're going to get up and leave and set off without the rest of the group. And for this question, I think I want to try something a little different. It's been interesting using Mythic both as a Game Master emulator and as a player emulator, but I'm finding it just a little strange how dramatically the chaos factor is affecting not just the environment, but also our player characters' decision making. I actually think it's a great thing for the chaos factor in Mythic to take such a heavy hand when we are asking questions about the environment, about NPCs, about the overall story. But I'm thinking that the adventure might flow better if our player emulation questions specifically were less influenced by the chaos factor. And so I don't know this for certain, but we're just going to try it out and see what happens, see if it starts to feel better. I'm going to ask player emulation questions for the time being to this mid-chaos fate chart, which is going to still allow the chaos factor to influence a character's decisions based on the current chaos factor, but it's not going to influence it as drastically as the regular fate chart. And if we end up liking this solution, we could even look at trying out the low chaos fate chart, which gives the chaos factor even less of an influence on questions, and in this case it would be on players' decision making. But yeah, let's try out the mid chaos fate chart. So I'm asking the question if Yalkand, Lila, and Darcy kind of look at each other and decide, have a side conversation, and just decide they're going to get up and walk out without the rest of the group. This is a chaos factor of 2 currently. I'm going to say that this outcome is very likely. And we get a 48. Yes, that was a roll under 65. So a 48 is in fact a yes. So Lila, Darcy, and Yalkand stand up, if they weren't already standing, and say something to the effect of, we don't have time for this, we're going no matter what, if anyone wants to come, you can follow us, but we're leaving now. And now I want to ask, given that Darcy has already made at least one announcement to the table, she might have just made the second one on behalf of the 3 of them as well, does she turn to the mindful mouse and the barely any people that are there and announce that they're leaving, they're heading to the mountain into the Dwarven Glory, and basically ask if anyone wants to join them on their adventure? Does she ask that out loud to anyone who is present in the room before they march out of the inn? And I'm going to say that this is actually unlikely. I think it's more likely that they just kind of storm out on their own. But we'll ask the Oracle anyway. With a chaos factor of 2, that makes this a roll under 25, and we get a 50 no. But Lila, Darcy, and Yalkand march out of the Mindful Mouse and turn down the road on their way to the gate of Artaud. And they reach the city gates, perhaps attached to a large stone wall wrapping around the city completely. And we already know that the golden sunshine is shining down upon them for the first time in many days. They turn back to the city for a moment, taking it in, the largest dwarven city in the entire archipelago, thriving and bustling, before turning to face the road and watching as it sweeps away from the city gates, before turning to look at each other. And with that, they march beyond the city gates and onto the road at last, so that our adventure is finally and truly underway. And I'm so very excited for the party to be traveling at last. Now I need to understand what their path to the Dwarven Glory is going to look like. So our map of the Isle of Baelor doesn't indicate any roads, but there are entries. Each hex, I'll show you, has a brief description of some kind of encounter that happens in that hex. And some of these descriptions indicate, or they either imply or state, the existence of roads or paths. It would be extremely unlikely for a civilization, right, to not have roads. So I think it's pretty safe to say that there's some kind of road network available on the Isle of Baelor, at a minimum connecting the 3 major cities, even if those roads are basically dirt footpaths for travelers to either walk on or to cart along. So we can assume that there's some kind of road leading from Artaud and around the Baelor Mountains here towards the city of Corbeil, but our party members rather want to exit the road and enter the mountains proper. Because somewhere in the mountains is the Dwarven Glory, and it's an abandoned Dwarven city, so there are certainly roads or at least paths leading through the mountains to that city. We don't really know if the Dwarven Glory is in Hex 10 or 11. It seems more likely that it would be in Hex 10, but we can ask Mythic to know for sure. Given that our adventure module does not specify, I'm going to ask Mythic, is the Dwarven Glory located in Hex... We'll ask if it's located in Hex 11 and say that this is unlikely. That is a roll under 10. And we get a 92. That is an exceptional no. So the journey to the Dwarven Glory really isn't very far. And according to our movement rules, a man on foot can actually move through 3 hexes in one day. And moving through mountainous terrain will cost 3 hexes worth of movement. So the party is capable of crossing an entire hex of mountain in a single day. So I'll judge that because the party is leaving sometime in the morning, they'll need to travel out along a normal or typical road towards the city of Corbeil, and then depart from this path to travel along some kind of footpath into the mountains. And moving through the mountains, they should be able to reach the Dwarven Glory within one day if they're not held up by anything. So let's set the scene with the party marching along on the road to Corbeil. Before they have to deviate from the main road, do they see a lot of traffic coming in and out of the city? It's the first sunshiny day in a while, and this is a large city that is going to depend heavily on people coming and going with supplies, travelers and merchants. So I'm going to say that this is nearly certain, but the chaos factor is 2, so this is only going to be a 50-50. Roll under 50, we get a 34, yes. So it is a busy morning on the road as people are definitely choosing to take advantage of the sunshine, and we have wagons and carts going in either direction. Maybe we have pilgrims and people dressed in all different kinds of clothes coming into the Dwarven City, leaving from the Dwarven City and traveling to Corbeil. Just a wide variety of sights, a very colorful experience leaving Artaud. And the party, they're very likely talking about what just went down at the Mindful Mouse. Are they essentially ranting or venting at each other about what happened at the tavern before they left? I'm going to say that this is nearly certain. This is going to be on our mid-chaos fate chart, a roll under 75. And we get a 24, that's a yes. So they're honestly probably bonding and getting a little closer as a group by this shared negative experience. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to add another entry to our characters list, disgruntled former party members that may come back to affect us in the future. So the weather's great, we're underway, we're making great progress down the main road. It's busy, there's lots of people coming back and forth, all kinds of interesting sights and sounds and smells as we're traveling. And I want to know now, does anything interesting happen along the way, at least while we're still traveling on the main road? I'm going to go back to Mythic Magazine 25 to the journey check table and ask the question if anything happens while we're traveling along the main road. And I'm going to assign this odds. I think it's likely because there's so much busyness kind of going on, so many people coming in and out, that makes it seem likely. But it also seems unlikely for anything too crazy to happen while we're traveling so close to the city. It doesn't seem like anything dangerous or truly extraordinary would happen this close to a city. So I actually don't know. I'll give this odds of 50-50. With a chaos factor of 2, that'll be a roll under 15, and we get a 95. That is an exceptional no, which means nothing happens in this segment or the next one. So even as the party eventually reaches the right footpath that splits away from the main road and heads east into the Baylor Mountains, nothing interesting happens, or at least nothing generated by the journey check. According to Book 3, The Underworld and Wilderness Adventures, at the end of each day we need to make a Wandering Monster check when exploring the wilderness. Original D&D's Wandering Monster checks, especially those in the wilderness, can be quite deadly. But I think we'll resolve this Wandering Monster check next time, as this feels like the perfect place to bring our session to a close. Thank you so very much for watching the 4th session of the Misty Isles campaign, where we're using the Mythic Game Master Emulator to play original Dungeons & Dragons with Chainmail solo. In today's session, we watched as our party, that was 12 strong, bitterly debated the dangers of the open road before fracturing, splintering down the middle, or should I say, into a quarter, as Lila, Darcy, and Yalkin stood up and left the Mindful Mouse alone, determined to carry on with the expedition against all odds, and even now, rounding the bend, away from the main road and on to a dirt footpath leading ever upwards into the Baylor Mountains, where narrow switchbacks hugging a frozen mountainside will lead them one step at a time to the Dwarven glory. If you enjoyed today's session, don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe for more solo role-playing content. I'm the Lonely Dungeoneer, and this has been episode 4 of Let's Play Original Dungeons & Dragons with Chainmail solo. Until we meet again, happy delving, and fight on!